Again, good morning, everybody. We will start the panel, the first panel of this day. We will have 4 presentations according to my schedule. The first one will be the presentation of the research paper of Ciampi, Cirulli, Politi, and Toti. We will talk about the bottom-up social innovation practice in the suburbs of Roma, the cases of Trullo and Torpignatara neighborhoods. So it's up to you how to organize the presentation.
Yeah, actually, in order to stay in the times at our disposal, just 2 of us are going to present, myself and Alessandro.
Very well.
I'm going to set my timer. So
very well. I'll give you the floor. Thank you so much for your presentation.
So let me share the PowerPoint. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Can you see? Okay, perfect. My screen. So our research is actually, as the title expresses, a research on 2 neighborhoods in Rome, Trullo and Torpignatara, 2 peripheral neighborhoods, although different kinds of peripheries. It's a broader research project on peripheries as territories of adoption. In this presentation, we will talk about the bottom-up social innovation practices in these 2 suburbs. The main theoretical framework where our research is integrated is the urban transformations that are affecting peripheries, in particular due to the neoliberalization process. So phenomena like polarization and social marginalization. So the phenomena of dual city, underlined by Manuel Castells, the quarter city in the Marchiuse, and the processes of expulsions described by Saskia Sassen. So our analysis of peripheries in Rome and these 2 particular peripheries in Rome is related to these processes, those processes of new diversification, new marginalization processes that are affecting cities due to the neoliberalization process. The main issue is the issue of the access to a full urban condition in these times. So there are the main phenomena related to this main framework are the urban sprawl and the peripherization process, the pluralization of peripheries. So we need to develop a better terminological skills, tools in order to understand properly this transformation. The rollback of public institutions, and at the same time, the activation of citizens and increase the role of urban informality. The ambivalent process of community building from below. Citizens, particularly in peripheries, our hypothesis is that citizens, particularly in peripheries, in order to respond to the rollback of public institutions, are activating new forms of community belongings, forms of community belongings that are inherently ambivalent. On one hand, they can be a closed project of community, so against new migrants, new inhabitants, in order to discover an ancient idea of community. On the other hand, those community building processes could be open projects, so inclusive and open to new inhabitants and so in order to develop a new identity for the community. Suburbs, peripheries, actually are a territorial sphere of reconstruction of subjectivity, also political subjectivity, among the different realities that are living suburbs, peripheries, and the more marginal part of the city. Regarding Roman peripheries, as Carlo Cellamare, one of the main urbanists that are studying urban transformations in Rome, stated in one of his seminal books, Rome is its peripheries. So in order to understand Rome, you have to understand its peripheries. The suburbs in Rome exploded in the 80s and the 90s, particularly. This explosion, increasing role of peripheries in Rome was related to spread and diversification of these suburbs, with a new mixture of all the new inhabitants that started to characterize these places. And then Rome, also Cellamare stated in his works, Rome is a do-it-yourself city with a crucial role of urban informality and self-organization, particularly in peripheries and suburbs. Our two case studies, the Trullo, that is a semi-peripheric area of the city with a strong sense of community belonging, with an historical relevance of urban informality and pretty crime, actually, as well, with a strong tradition of popular participation, mutualism, and self-management, particularly around the squatted former cinema Ricomincio dal Faro, with a significant presence of migrants, particularly from Eastern Europe, related to the development sector, the building sector. In this map, you can see the red spot is the Trullo neighborhood near the ring surrounding Rome. The second case study, Tor Pignatara, is an historical Roman periphery. Currently, due to the development of the metropolitan area in Rome, is less peripheral on a geographical point of view, but still socially perceived as periphery. Tor Pignatara was destination of internal migration at the beginning of the 20th century and after the Second World War. In the last 3 decades, now is destination of international migrants, particularly from Bangladesh. Tor Pignatara is also known as Bangla Town in Rome, and it's a neighborhood close to Pigneto neighborhood, a neighborhood that actually is experimenting a hard process of gentrification. This is the Tor Pignatara neighborhood, the red spot in the map. And then the focus of our analysis is the perceptions of activists or residents in those two neighborhoods. And visual analysis, we analyze particularly the relationship with institutions, the participation and involvement of different types of residents, and the conflicts related to urban regeneration and social innovation processes. The first case that we are presenting today in a synthetic way is the former Baccelli School in Trullo, an abandoned former school where activists, particularly activists from the Ricomincio dal Faro squad, created a popular gym, a popular bakery, developed projects of mutualism in order to help the poorest part of the inhabitants of the neighborhood. They have, in their interviews, emerged that they have a minimal relationship with the institution. They are not particularly interested to get in touch with the institution. There is a low involvement of new activists. The inner core of the activists in the Baccelli School are activists with a strong background of activism in local movements. And then this project is related to a broader political project of popular hegemony. So it's a quite well politically defined project. Now I pass the word to Alessandro in order to develop the presentation and going toward the conclusion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The practices implemented in the Tor Pignataro district are closely interrelated with what the residents consider the main problems of the district. On the one hand, the state of abandonment and degradation of the territory, and on the other, the strong increase in the foreign population, so much so as to be now famous under the name of Banglatown. As for the abandonment, the first case we consider is the committee of Villa Certosa, a small area that is part of the neighborhood. The committee operating in this area is often seen by all the residents as a substitute for the institutions, which are perceived as completely absent. The absence of institution and the strong socio-political identity of the area lead the committee to act autonomously, without seeking the involvement of local institutions. An example is given by the creation of what is called Liberated Garden, a space belonging to the municipality that until a few years ago was in a state of neglect, and which has now been recovered and made available to residents, thanks to the independent initiative of the committee and with the help of volunteers. The second case reported here is the Pisacane organization, made up of parents and teachers from the Pisacane school, considered the most multi-ethnic in Rome. Given the growing number of foreign students and the so-called ghetto classes, the school has suffered a decline in enrollment by Italian students over the years. And in order to remedy this condition, the organization, parents and teachers has worked with the aim of establishing an intercultural dialogue between the natives and various foreign communities living in the neighborhood. An example is given by the event Taste the World, organized with the aim of making Italians aware of the food and cultural tradition of the students who attend the school. To conclude our speaking, on the one hand, the suburbs are characterized by growing social exclusion, but on the other hand, they can mobilize resources that can lead to the development of social capital and bottom-up social innovation practices. As can be seen from these cases, the process of peripheralization induced the residents of the two districts to implement forms of self-organization that can remedy the sense of insecurity caused by the erosion of the public. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We will go back with some remarks later. Maybe I have just a couple of suggestions that comes to my mind. The first maybe is the problem for the peripheries of mobility, transportation. So we should always consider the space as a metaphor of in etymological terms. So consider every part of the city as connected with the other part of the city, of the town. So the problem of transportation for peripheries is crucial, I would say. For Roma, regarding to the case of Roma, a good suggestion would be go back to the words of Pasolini. Pasolini wrote many years ago a beautiful work on Roma, peripheries, and the peripheries of the rest of the world that still has some suggestions to our work on the peripheries. The third suggestion would be Paolo Portoghesi. Paolo Portoghesi has worked a lot in Roma, and he always said that Roma is a fragile town. And I agree with him. I mean, Roma is really fragile. And when we are talking about the mixité and the common goods, I would say, we have to take into consideration that if something is fragile, we have to take it as a baby. You have to take care of it. That's the three suggestions that I would like to talk about. So now I'll give the floor to from Roma to the beautiful Jakarta, to Victoria Fangide. Hey, I hope I've been through a good pronunciation of your family name. I think that you're from Indonesia, or your origin is from Indonesia. I could, yeah. And Victoria would present us a work on the fragility, uncertainty of Jakarta. Thank you so much, Victoria. As usual, we have 12, 13 minutes, 40 minutes for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon from here. So first, I would like to say thank you for the organizer who have worked to make this conference happen since the postponement last year, and also thank you for the opportunity to give me the time to speak about part of my PhD research findings, which I give title Institutionally Induced Uncertainty, in an effort to understand Jakarta's underclass turn to individualistic survival strategy. So this is just the structure of my presentation will be all the background objective methodology is part of my broader PhD project, and then the Nono's case I will use to exemplify how the people in Jakarta perceive institutions as part of their risk and uncertainties of their everyday life. And then I will go to discuss a little bit before presenting the results that will link the case with the result of my PhD thesis. So yeah, this is the background why I'm interested to do my PhD project is because of the low coverage of national social security system, and it's in the media, in policymakers always say that why you don't want to pay and enroll, it's for your own goodness, insurance, because insurance will cover you when unfortunate events happens, and it will compensate your losses with money, and but then came to question whether insurance logic and risk rationality, such rationality that is used in insurance, modern insurance, it came from Western background, European background. How is it different in Indonesia? So my research actually is interested to learn about how risk and insurance from non-Western context using Indonesia case. So I would like to understand how they perceive and engage with risk and uncertainty in their everyday life practices and strategies. So the methodology I use grounded theory and with some sensitizing concepts that I developed in the beginning and then use it during the analytical process. And I use the problem-centered interviews to interview 30 research participants all over in Jakarta, Greater Jakarta, and some rural West Java area in mid-2018. So why I would like to give a little note for the before I go to the case is because I came to understand the case of Nono, one of my research participants in Central Jakarta, because I understand from his perspective and from the structural and societal conditions about the influence of the structural to his perspectives about risk and uncertainties. So this is the problem-centered interviews, which consisted of 2 parts. So the first part of the interviews is the narrative that the research participants construct the meaning from his perspective. So it's what topics and what concerns that he has, he constructed himself in the beginning, and then in the second part of the interview, I, as the interviewer, explore their social relationships, context, and other societal conditions and their influence in his biography. That's how I came to Nono's case. So Nono is a angkot or mikrolet. That's the public transport like this in common in Indonesia. So it's owned by just personal individuals. Sometimes they are joined in a cooperative or organization, but most likely the owners are just individuals without affiliations to any cooperative. So it's totally private, but private in the sense of like organic. So Nono's case will exemplify how people in the low rung of socioeconomic ladder, they think in short term, they always make decisions just at the time. So it's very contingent rather than what's expected by policymakers and the modern world. Use your rational thinking, plan ahead, save, insure, and it's always been in the media portrayed people from the lower socioeconomic level as people who just don't care about planning. They don't care about the future. They don't plan. So I will start with giving you just a hint about Jakarta in case you don't know where Jakarta is. So this is Jakarta. Is one of the megacities in the world. 10, almost 11 million people. With the greater Jakarta consists of like 20 million people, and it's very highly. It's the ultimate portrait of Indonesia's inequality. So Jakarta's, it's just less than 10% of the landmass, but it has like a quarter of the total GDP of the country. So, and the population is like 16,000 people per kilometer square compared to the rest of Indonesia. So average Indonesia, it's like just 140 people per kilometer square. So that shows how Indonesian development inequality reflected in Jakarta. It also has all the, as you can see here, all kind of megacities problem. You have the crowded slum settlements, traffic congestions, government, quasi-government, semi-government, and all the different kind of governance structures in the city, and entangled with that all complex relations between people, personal, institutions, which sometimes it's hard to disentangle. And my research participant lives in central Jakarta. So this is at the bottom left, bottom right is Tanah Abang. Tanah Abang is one of the largest clothing market retail area in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. So the money circulated in there is one of the largest concentrated in Jakarta. So with money, you have everything else come. You have all the illegal street vendors, all kind of transports, people who sell things in the streets, and of course the political, economic of all governor is trying to regulate Tanah Abang area as their the symbol of the success of their political success. And so to give you a picture of how risk in terms of natural disasters in Jakarta. If you see that red map with all red, so this is the map that's issued by the National Agency for Disaster Management. And in terms of scale of low to high risk, red is high risk. So pretty much all areas in Jakarta is high risk. Then you have the natural risk imposed on you from everywhere. It's flood. Flood is like regular in Jakarta, so you get to prepare for that. So this is my research participant, Nono. His name is Nono. So he's second generation of migrant from Central Java who migrated to Jakarta to look for job. He just have his 9 years primary schooling. Tried to get into regular job as many people in Indonesia aspire to have regular job, which is not too many available. But he failed because he said he did not have connection and internal context in Jakarta to get through, because even to get a job as a security in shopping malls, you have to know someone. And as a result, he didn't get a regular job. So he just became an angkot driver, the blue van, minivan driver. And also he's just a second driver. So there are 3 drivers for 1 van. And he's just a replacement one. And he has 2 jobs because income must be supplemented. So first half of the day he spent to be an angkot driver. And then after dark, he worked as a Grab. It's an online platform, so it's like Uber in Jakarta, for second half of the day in the night time. And at the weekend, he worked fully as a Grab driver. So when I interviewed him, most of the perceptions, he perceived the most insecurities are income and the risk of accident in the street, because he said the street is just like in the forest. It's rule of jungle. And he said, because I drive 12 people in my bag, so it's my responsibility to keep them safe. So it's a high responsibility for me. And what if there's an accident, it's me who will go to jail. But recently, at the time, he said that there are too many regulatory changes, and he could, because some streets are blocked and changes in traffic management make him become more worried about income. He's not insured, and he said, I might change. He's just focusing on just paying the car's credit, rent, child's needs. And he pictured himself as much as possible, I will try to be a responsible father, send my child to have better life. So aspire for upward mobility. And only if I have spare money, I will save. That's and about old age, because my research is on social insurance. And he said that although he considered to return to village, it's in Central Java. It's better, he said, no pollution, no slum, living in a nice place, but no job opportunities for low educated people like him. So it's a no option if I want to eat. I want to feed my family. That's what he said. And somewhat he have hopeful when the previous governor started to fix the Tanah Abang traffic, but changed after the current governor was elected. I will explain that later. He's aware of the political changes and the impacts on the street, hence his income. So this is what the interview with him would like. What he pictured is like on the left, there are always changes. So the changes are constant. Probably next 60 days, the governor will change the regulation again. the vice governor just issued a new program for us, for drivers, but I don't know whether it's continued or not, because when they did the trial, it didn't work. And that's why I said, what I will do, it's never end. The changes just never end on the street on regulations. What should I will decide what should I just go through, so I'll just leave it, and what should I act upon. What if I need to do something, I'll do it, but if I don't need to, I'll just don't care about it and move on. So that's the kind of attitude, like in my coding, somewhat I put, it's just minding my own business. It's better to think about my own future. I earn for my family, for me, for my child. I don't want to think about governments, what kind of regulation they will put on, what new regulation, who will be elected the next election. I don't care, because I will just focus, because it's never ending. If you think about it, just think of yourself. And so with the problem-centered interview, I was looking for also what's the structural problems that make him think about all the changes and decide that I wouldn't think about it. And I'd rather would think of myself and my family. So this is what happened in Jakarta. Jakarta is it's a high stake with all the wealth and business and politics contestations there. It's a winning place. If you want to win the presidential election, you win Jakarta first. So it's always been in a high stake for political. So this is what happened in Jakarta. So I tried to put this in a chronological order of what's the context that that my research participants perceived. So in 2016, they ousted this Chinese Christian governor using a primordial issue, like he's not Islam, he's just did a blasphemy to Quran. So they deployed like 1 million something people to go to the street and ousted him, brought him to court, and sent him to jail because of blasphemy, which had nothing to do with his performance as a governor. So that's just within a year. He was sent to jail. In 2008, the new governor who took benefits of these political problems, in 2018, he was elected, and he did all the things that some of my research participants who are Muslim said that this is not really what Muslims do, because he invited all the Christians groups to do Christmas choir in the street, which was something that would not have happened even in the during the governance of Ahok, this Christian governor. So this change happened in less than 4 years' time. So what their expectations to what the governor will do and what bring him to power, they don't seem to align in any pattern. So it's short terms, but significant change, but no pattern. So yeah, you're getting confused about how to predict next in 20-something what would happen. Anything could happen in a year. So this is the policy at the more micro level. So in Tanah Abang area, traffic management, as I said earlier, is always been a high stake because that's where all the money is. And also changes. So in 2012, it was different governor. It's unregulated, and it was like this in the picture. And 2015, the new governor changed that to make it much better, according to my research participant, according to Nono. So his angkot, he gained more money, like everything went better, and he put hope on the governments, like government made some good changes and I earned more. But then suddenly, so that's the governor that was ousted. Between 1 to 2 years time, it changed back. So 2018 is just similar to 2012. It changed not for the better, it's changed for the worse. And he said that he wouldn't know what will happen if new governor of this governor dealt with different people, because in 2018 the new governor dealt with street vendors, and that's the base of his constituencies. So he offered them a place to trade, which is the street. But by doing that, he's blocking the street, and angkot drivers like Nono spend forever in the street but earn nothing. So Nono said that he cannot predict what will happen next, and I just tried to put this as in chronological order. So what Nono thinks is the uncertainties it's created by so many factors here. So from political, he said the changes to governors, it's posed give uncertainty for him, laws and regulations, the governors, the apparatus, and the traffic, the police, religious leaders don't give any assurance also, as he said that you can see that both Muslims and Christians, they just say yes to the to the power, so it doesn't matter. They don't make any difference. And also the technology. So as an angkot driver, he feels the competition from the online platforms, but he himself is an online platform driver, but he feels that it's giving him more uncertainties. And these are some of the conflicting policies that he mentioned about the OK Trip. It's the new program by the vice governor. It's a failed program. So now I read on newspaper and found out that it didn't work. But with the program failed, the vice governor was promoted to become a minister in presidential cabinet due to some political negotiation at the national level. So what lay people see is that it's despite all this meritocracy and good governance jargon, someone can create a failed program, totally failed, but being promoted. So people just said, okay, I don't want to think about what politics because it works differently. It's not something that you can predict. It could be really totally different. And yeah, with all of the things that, so some of this discussed as part of the how institutions are actually, they are rarely efficient and unstable, although ideally they should be, because people expectations, so people like Nono, they expect that institution can regulate, can have policies that make their life better, or things are neat, at least in the street, in the...
Victoria, may I ask you to go to the conclusion, please?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so it's two more slides. So from Nono's case and other interviewees, I developed this the dimension for my typology, and I end up with this typology, the type called surviving the present, who with this kind of type. So Nono falls into this this type, but then in my thesis I explain that how people come to become this surviving, deploy just survival strategies. It's merely to survive because of the too many of much pressures from outside, including institutions in the context of Jakarta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It was very interesting to face the complexity of Jakarta. There is a word in Indonesian, if I remember well, to describe the fragility and the risk is tidak pasti. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember this word, the tidak pasti, to say that something is uncertain. And the complexity of Jakarta is paradigmatic, I would say, because there are so many issues inside the mega city of Jakarta. So now I'll give the floor to our third guest of today. It's a group, if I'm not wrong. It's Galantino, Gentili, and maybe
that's it?
Alessandro.
No,
Galantino. Scusa. It's a very interesting. The abstract was quite interesting. It's predictive policing through crime risks assessment in Italy. So it's your time. Thank you. I give you the floor. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll try to share the screen. Do you see it? Do you see the screen?
Yes, right. Yes.
Okay. Please give me a sign when I'm about to finish my time, so we leave some time for discussion.
12 to 14 minutes. It's up to you.
Okay, thank you. This research I'm going to present today is a joint research together with Francesca Gentili, that is here in the audience. And this was part also of her master dissertation. And so she carried out a lot of empirical research about that. The case of predictive policing in Italy is not a well-established practice, a well-established way of dealing with crime, but there are a few experiments going on since a few years. So this is a research on two of them, the two main, most important, or at least the first attempts to deal with the issue. I will go very fast about the premises, the background. Obviously, for this sort of practice and strategy to develop, there is a social terrain and a terrain that makes it possible. So we based our theoretical background on the idea of surveillance culture, Lion in particular, and this idea that surveillance is not only a top-down process, but people actively participate in an attempt to regulate their own surveillance and the surveillance of others. Then another ongoing trend in society is the switch to actuarial paradigm of risk, with this emphasis on measuring, predicting risk. And obviously this is a long-going process, long more than a century, but it's particularly evident probably today. Obviously, these changes have an impact on the specific penal and criminal system with the preventive turn, and this idea of the preventive state as the entanglement of criminal justice and predictive risk regulation. This also changes a bit the way we deal with the issue, because we are moving from traditional or older objects of attention as individuals, as the subject of punishment and also the subject of correctional attention, to a sort of categorization. Lion says social sorting, where basically we look at specific categories as targets of policies against crime. So within this context, what is predictive policing? Very shortly, is a crime prevention strategy that uses statistical techniques to make prediction about future criminal activities. So basically connecting a set of very complex variables that normally are related to space, time, and social networks, predictive policing aims to predict when and where a crime is likely to occur, the probability that a person will commit a crime or will be a victim of a crime, and then the probability of relapse. What we did was basically our main objective was to pry open the black box of predictive policing, try to look inside and reconstruct the history of 2 predictive policing softwares in Italy. Also, we aim to identify visions of risk and urban safety that were beyond the algorithm itself and that informed the algorithm. Then to examine modes of operation and then assess the implementation status. Methodologically, we basically used a lot of different secondary sources. So all websites and online materials, but also media reports, articles, documents, and some evaluation reports. I will go back to this evaluation issue later on. Then we carried on in-depth interviews with the main software developers. This was quite a difficult attempt because there is not so much willingness to open this black box to researchers. So the first software is called XLaw. It started basically, the experimentation and the idea started in Naples in 2004. And what is very interesting is that both will see these softwares were created within the police department. So there is an actor, a police officer that starts to think about it and starts also to develop the technology to act. The theoretical roots are criminological theories of everyday life. I will not go much into that, assuming that some of you are familiar with it. And then opportunity theory. How did they work? Basically, they used the data from official repositories, which were obviously the criminal justice reports, so reports registered by the police. And to that, they also added all sorts of databases on people mobility, public transports, but also socioeconomic activities. So data coming from the business sector and so on. The idea was basically how it worked. Connecting all this data, they aimed to identify what they called hunting reserves. So areas of the cities that were not simply the areas with the highest rate of crime. So the logic is not exactly the logic of hotspots that is very much diffused around the world, but the logic was to identify the areas where more opportunity for crime were there. The aim was then to enact prevention through targeted police patrols. So they identified the areas and then they were patrolling that area more constantly than others. Here on the right side, you see the declared results. Declared because obviously there is not any form of external evaluation of these softwares, but they report that these decreased to a certain extent a lot of different crimes, as you can see from these tables. Here, I'll just give you an idea because in this case, we managed to get pictures and to see the program, the software working. So basically, these are the so-called the areas where imminent crimes, where crime is likely to happen in the next few hours. And according to the intensity of the color and the different colors, so we can see how high the risk was and what sort of crimes they were. This is an area of Naples around the Spanish quarters. Another output of these, which is very interesting, I'm sorry, the quality of this picture is not very good because we had to make pictures from pictures, But this gives you an idea of their provisional alert. So this is the hunting area where they presume that a crime is likely to occur. And on the right side, we can see a description of the specific profile they are going to look for. So we know that is a man of about 45 years, that is tall, that is slim, is Italian, and the probable target will be a foreign citizen. So this is what they get on their computer. The police officers get on their computer, and then they can target their patrolling to that specific area. The other software is a software that was developed in Milan, started a bit later in 2008, but it has a bit of different history because it started as a software that used within the police department and was developed by a police officer. But then this guy decided to retire, to go in the private market, and now is a big suite which is called Delia. That's the guy, I mean, that his company offers on the market. So this also tells us a lot about these difficult relationship between market and public institutions within the crime sector. The theoretical routes are quite different. They base basically their idea on preventive incapacitation. The idea is basically that in order to reduce crime, we have to be more efficient in repressing crime. So it's not exactly the same preventive idea that informed the previous software. The guy from Naples told us, if I arrest somebody, I fail. My aim is to put obstacles to the crime. Here, the idea is to connect different crimes, and so to identify people that did many crimes over time. They use also police records. The data are basically police records. And for that, they developed very sophisticated and detailed forms that each officer has to fill in order to feed variables within the software. In this way, they basically managed to connect all this information and identify a profile of a crime of a criminal, and especially to link crimes over time. So to see if a crime that is being committed today has some analogies with crimes that were committed in the past. And the aim here is to make more efficient the investigation, because the guy says, if I arrest somebody only for a theft or a robbery, I do nothing. I have to link him to previous robberies. I have to prove that he has done other robberies. So as you can see here, this incapacitation idea is really behind it. And the idea is basically that we are more effective when we manage to give stronger punishments and stronger sentences. Here also we have some declared results that are, as you see, how they measure results is very different, because here is basically cleared robberies. So crimes that have been solved, cases that have been solved. So basically they pass from 10% to 47%. So just to draw some conclusions, the assessed impact, at least from the point of view of the actors that develop and put in place these strategies, is crime reduction, but especially the emphasis is very much on resource savings and more efficiency in police investigation and in the penal system. Then there is also, but this looks a little bit an afterthought, especially in the Milan case, the increased sense of safety and security for the people. Obviously, these effects have some unexpected consequences, which are not so unexpected, that you can see here on the right side. There are some bias in data inputs. Data that are inputted in the system are constructed by, most of the time, by the police themselves. So obviously they incorporate practices and ideas and visions by the police officers. There is the problem of profiling, and we know there is a lot of literature about this issue, especially in the US case. There is the issue of self-reinforcement, which is connected to that, because obviously working on specific area or on specific profile then creates self-reinforce the connection between those people, those area and crime. And then there is an issue of weak agency and responsibility of the police. I will say a bit more about that. Just to conclude and to keep it short, because I'd like, we can answer your question later if you are interested. Some critical issues are very relevant, not only in the field of preventive policing, but more generally in the use of algorithms in this sector. The first is related to the issue of values. Obviously, these algorithms enact value choices. There are people, humans, that decide what to look at and what to ignore. And these can be made explicit, but sometimes are implicit by those who build them and implement them. This also has an effect on evaluation, because it's interesting. If you look at the declared results, basically the evaluation indicators are the product of the premises on which the algorithm is based. So basically it's a sort of self-evaluating instrument. Then there is the issue of agency, as I said before. It is very interesting, but these also from the interviews to these police officers, basically it's like if a neutral agency is introduced within the police action, which replaces agencies of the police themselves. And so basically, this looks like a neutral agency. And this has an effect also on the responsibility, because obviously what they don't choose directly what to do, but they do what the algorithm tells them to do. And this is a very important issue in terms of responsibility when pursuing a crime. Obviously, there is also the issue of a governmentality, and this is also very much debated in the literature, because these are practices of calculation, but also of regulation of social life. They restructure completely the way cities are organized and are thought of. And then the issue of performativity. There is this interesting article that talks about from taming chance to shaping chance. So these strategies, these practices can do more than tame chance. It's possible that allocating limited law enforcement resources on the basis of these predictive models, we transform the social reality we live in. If we identify a correlation between a group and criminal activity, and then we target our law enforcement on the basis of that trait, then the effect is that the correlation itself gets reinforced. Here, obviously, the problem is not so much the proliferation of printed numbers, the proliferation of predictive models, of algorithms, and so on and so forth. But once again, we go back to the basic issue, that is how we use the information. And unfortunately, or what comes out from studying all these new practices, what comes out is that people do not feel responsible about how these information are then used. Their work is to feed the system, to feed in the system, and who is gonna then be responsible for the outcomes. So I will close here, and I wish to get your questions and suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. It was really interesting to get your paper, to get your research. It's you really did my day, I would say. So I'm very happy of your presentation. Brilliant and beautiful. So last but not least, Tatiana and Isova and Laura Schmidt, they will again go back to the urban security from Budapest to Milano. I don't know who's going to start. Is Tatiana or Laura? You will organize yourself. I remember you that you have 12 minutes. Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you so much for organizing this conference, and it is very inspiring, and I got a lot of insights already from previous day as well. And so our presentation is devoted to the discourses on urban insecurity that are generated by the policies, so by the legislation, and by NGOs that work in urban security field. And the cities are Budapest and Milan. Oops. Okay, so in Europe, there is a general trend that crime rates are declining. And as you can see in the graphs, the same trends are traceable in the studies countries and the cities. But additionally, there is increasing securitization and fortification of urban spaces. But at the same time, the problem of urban insecurity and the fear of crime remains very actual in the cities in Europe. We also use a neoliberal framework to analyze the data in our study. In particular, we consider that the neoliberal turn developing across Europe since 1980s, 1990s, highlighted the local nature of crime and its direct impact on the local population. Because it always happened in a specific space and in a specific time. Additionally, therefore, urban spaces have become a perfect place for the implementation of urban security policies and intervention. And such notions as urban security and community protections were highlighted in urban public debate. Additionally, neoliberal shift encouraged the redistribution of some of the state's responsibilities to a local level. So since 1980s, 1990s, municipal authorities have started to play a more active role in urban security provision. And additionally, such grassroots organizations as Neighborhood Watch entered the public arena and appeared at that time. And moreover, the legislation quite often encourages this state-civil partnership for security provision, and especially it does so at the city or municipal level. Lastly, previous studies show that the legislation and the NGOs can generate different discourses on different social problems. So for instance, in both countries, in Italy and in Hungary, legislation and NGOs generated different discourses on the problem of migration that happened in 2015. So the goal of our research is to study how the problem of urban insecurity is constructed in the discourses generated by the relevant legislations and by the representatives of NGOs working in this field. To analyze the legislation, we draw a full list of law and other legal documents that were in power by December 31st, 2019, because we didn't want to account for a pandemic situation, which was completely different. And we draw the document at the national level, at the region for Italy only, because in Hungary, it is a bit different, the structure of the state. And so the region was Lombardy and cities, so Budapest and Milan. And then we submitted the data to critical content analysis to analyze NGOs. We search for such NGOs as Neighborhood Watch, Citizen Patrol, Victim Assistance. Additionally, we watched the legislation and tried to identify the main problems that are connected to the problem of urban insecurity there. So for instance, in Hungary, it is homelessness. In Milan, it is migrants integration. And so we looked for such NGOs as well. In total, we conducted 8 semi-structural interviews, and in Budapest, we did it in April and May 2020, in Milan, September and October 2020. The average length of an interview was 1 hour, and then again, we subjected the data to critical content analysis.
At the beginning of the analysis, we studied the official definitions of urban security, as they help to understand the normative framework established in the countries for maintaining urban security. So you can see both definitions on the screen. However, we should note that the Hungarian legislation does not provide a unified definition of urban security. Both definitions underline the local nature of urban security, and they imply that the actions should be developed based on the local context. In addition, both definitions prioritize social crime prevention. And at the same time, the Hungarian legislation has a top-down approach to urban security, so only local authorities could implement crime prevention, while the Italian definition of urban security implies the horizontal approach as well. So this means that the local inhabitants should also be involved in the security matters. The Hungarian legislation in the field of urban insecurity discusses both social and situational problems. And urban security is constructed in the legislation through such problems as the risk of victimization, vulnerability, urban decay, lack of neighborhood trust or trust in the municipal authorities and the police, homelessness, as this was mentioned before, and repetitive offenses. Although it should be pointed out that the legislation usually discusses the general problems and does not deal with some of the problems specific to the city, except for homelessness. One of the researchers suggested it could be attributed to the fact that neoliberalization was planted in the European post-Soviet countries and didn't evolve naturally. So therefore, urban security policies are created based on the so-called best practice examples of other cities and rarely account for the local context.
And now let's look at the Italian legislation. And as you can see, also the urban insecurity is constructed there through social and situational problems. In particular, such social problems as social marginality and exclusion, social degradation, and increased vulnerability are mentioned in connection with urban insecurity. As to the situational problems, abusive occupation of public spaces, urban decay, and illegal trade are discussed in the Italian legislation. However, unlike the Hungarian legislation, the Italian one, especially at the local level, so city in Milan, discusses more specific problems by mentioning their exact manifestations. So, for example, social degradation manifests itself through the presence of homeless people in the street prostitution, and begging.
The representatives of the NGOs from Budapest built their discourse on urban insecurity mostly around some situational problems. In particular, criminal activity was discussed, especially muggings, robberies, and so on. Also, they discussed the visible manifestations of urban decay. So, for example, not well-maintained underpasses, alleys, streets, littering, etc. And traffic jams and the higher presence of commuters in some areas of the city are also an issue that was mentioned in connection with urban insecurity. As to the social problems, the representatives of NGOs mentioned primarily antisocial behavior and the presence of so-called others in the area. So, for example, drug users and homeless people. Even if they do not commit any crime, their presence in the street is connected to the conditions of urban insecurity.
And contrary to it, the representative of Italian NGOs from Milan, when discussing urban insecurity, focused mainly on some social issues in the city. Of course, they mentioned criminal activity when talking about urban insecurity, so they mentioned such crimes as theft, robberies, violence, aggression, and others. Furthermore, visible signs of urban decay were also mentioned by the representatives of NGOs. So in particular, they mentioned littering, graffiti, abandonment of some sites. But mainly these problems are characteristic to the peripheric areas of the city, not to the city center. As to the social problems discussed by the respondents in connection with urban insecurity, the disintegration of social ties, of traditional social ties, was discussed. So according to the respondents from Milan, there is alienation of a person, and a person usually cannot establish a meaningful connection with others or with a community. Additionally, the respondents mentioned the increased fragility and vulnerability of the local population, in particular the concentration of migrants, low-skilled workers, and people with lower living standards, again in the periphery of the city, was discussed as a condition of urban insecurity in Milan. And lastly, the representatives of NGO discussed social stratification and social tension in connection with the problem of urban insecurity. Especially social differentiation between the rich and the poor, so-called groups, was highlighted in the discourse. And quite often this group can live side by side with each other, and it could lead to a visible manifestation of the social differentiation. So in particular, richer or wealthier groups could allow themselves to live in fortified houses or in gated communities, while the poorer ones cannot do so.
The Hungarian legislation focuses on more general problems directly connected with urban insecurity. Partially, it can be explained by the socioeconomic and political development in the country. So, for example, as we mentioned before, there is a tendency to ignore the local context in urban security policies in cities in which they are planted, based on the best practice examples rather than developed naturally. And additionally, one of the researchers points out that the ruling conservative government plans the development of Budapest to reconstruct the so-called glorious past of the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it is more focused on restoring it in the future than solving the current problems. Lastly, the current conservative government of Hungary seeks to establish the hierarchical mode of governance, firstly through the inclusion of the municipalities into the vertical of power, as it was established in the fundamental law in 2012. And secondly, it is achieved by not including the civil sector in urban security provision. As to the Hungarian NGOs, they generate the discourse on urban insecurity, mostly devoted to situational problems. Firstly, it can be attributed to the fact that the manifestations of situational problems are encountered daily. And secondly, it suggests that in Budapest, there is a mixture of hierarchical and nodal governance, which is a mode of governance when actors interact with for solving a specific problem. So for instance, neighborhood watch, provision of services to homeless people, and so on. The Italian legislation, on the contrary, discusses specific urban security problems and accounts for them. And however, it should be pointed out that in Milan and Italy in general, there is a tendency for the right-wing political forces to utilize urban insecurity discourse to attract voters, and they introduce related policies. At the same time, the left-wing parties usually ignore the issue. The Italian NGOs generate the discourse on urban insecurity that mainly revolves around social problems. It might be due to the higher involvement of the civil sector in the cooperation with the local authorities and the dominance of co-governance over the problem of urban insecurity in Italy, as it means that the civil sector plays an essential role in solving the problem.
And thank you for your attention, and we would love to receive some of the questions or maybe comments as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura and Tatiana. It was quite interesting. We crossed so many different issues today, this morning, and about the security and insecurity in the urban complexity, I would say. I've got so many suggestions from you, so I want to really thank you again for your participation and for your contribution. Maybe Fabio would add something to some suggestion to this morning.
Thank you, Raffaele. Well, I've been listening with great attention to all the contributions, and I think there's really a lot of things to consider. The one that hit me the most, I must admit, was the one from Maria Grazia's, the question of algorithms and surveillance algorithms is quite on my mind, has been quite on my mind for some time. So I would like to ask her if she's got into the question of the making of these algorithms, because there is not only the question of the fact that they are written by humans, and so they are clearly not neutral, even if our imaginary tends to present them like that. But there is also the question of their self-construction and reproduction by access to various other online resources, as databases and archives of software and whatever. So I think it's a truly risky situation, and I'm not so sure that it's worth the risk. So I would like to ask her opinion about that. Thank you very much. And thanks to all others. Hearing about Trullo and Tor Bella Monaca is always a pleasure.
Shall I answer? Very, very briefly, yes, this is a problem, and this is something that Francesca and we did not really manage to get into, because obviously there is the problem of seeing how it works. But one thing is interesting in the Italian case, because they pose very much the issue of privacy. So officially, I tell you, because I do not believe it 100%, but these algorithms do not use, for instance, social media or other sources of data. So they are allowed, first of all, two are the conditions for them to use them within the police system. The first one is that they use only official data. So that means data that are produced and generated by other institutions, Chamber of Commerce or the municipality or the traffic or and so on and so forth. This is the first condition, so they cannot use data coming from other platforms. And the second condition is that obviously that these materials then cannot be used in trials. So it's something that they use in the process while they are searching for criminals, while they are connecting crimes, but they cannot be used as a proof, as evidence in the trials. So these two issues pose some limits. Then obviously the issue remains, because we do not really know. And more these products become market products, something that has been sold in the market, less open they are to external evaluation, external inquiry. In the case of the Milan software, it told, I cannot show you how it works on the screen, because that's copyrighted. That's what we sell, and I cannot show you. So this is, I also would like to pose a question, if I can, as I have the chance now. Just something for Tatiana and Laura. You know, having studied urban security in Rome in the last probably 20 years, I was a bit, you know, surprised by your research, because at least in the case of Milan in particular, in the past, did not emerge this strong social prevention orientation in police and security policies in the city. There was a huge research we did with the mayors all over Italy, and then focusing on specific cities, and Milan was among them. And at least in all the early 20s, there was a big tradition of using mainly situational measures. So for you, is a question of research. Has there been a change in the last years? There is a turn in the orientation of such policies, or this is simply the point of view of the NGOs which clash with the official way of dealing with crime? And as obviously here, the political variable is also very relevant, because Milan has had a right-wing mayor for a very long time, and her, together with the police chief, they were in Italy the ones promoting more a sort of very tough attitude towards crime and urban security. So I was wondering about the change. So my suggestion is to look at it also in a more diachronical manner. Otherwise, the picture that comes out from Italy is a little bit too nice.
No, I agree with you that it is a bit like a fairy tale, that it is only social approach in the policies as well. Obviously, yes. First of all, there is this political shift in Milan, maybe due to the change of the mayor, and the last election confirmed it, that there is still this left-wing approach. Although, as Laura said in her conclusions, that usually left-wing government, they kind of do not touch this topic of urban insecurity. So, for instance, if we look at the very, very local level of governance in Milan, usually mayors, I mean, the previous mayor, who was right-wing, and I think you studied exactly her, she was very tough on crime. And as you mentioned, she introduced a lot of local bylaws, let's say. So while the current mayor, he rarely speaks about this topic. So yes, I assume that since we studied more at this part of the research, at least NGOs, yes, maybe they are more focused on this social crime prevention, because that's what they can do. They cannot, because situational quite often means that they need to invest, and they don't have a lot of resources to do so. But at the same time, I would say that probably there is a shift, slow shift towards social crime prevention in Italy, maybe as well, because I spoke to Gian Guido Nobili for my research as well, and he's quite, I would say, positive in a way about that, how to say, step by step, there is a change towards the understanding that social crime prevention and the involvement of local citizens is a solution of urban insecurity problem, and especially of the perception of urban insecurity.
Well, thanks everybody. I think it's time to go to another panel, if I'm not wrong. So I want to thank you again for the participation to this panel, to Tatiana, to Laura, to Maria Grazia, to, of course, Victoria, with her contribution from the beautiful Jakarta, and to Adriano about the peripheries of Roma. So Trullo and Tor Pignataras are always on our mind, as Fabio said before. So thanks again, and see you on the next panel. Thank you.